Good morning and welcome to Godly Play. Today's story is called Feeding the 5,000, or sometimes it's called the story of the loaves and fishes. Now, you might remember from some of the other stories that we talked about how Jesus and the disciples were traveling around the countryside, meeting so many people and giving Jesus a chance to talk to the people and teach the people and tell them different stories. And the things that Jesus had to say were becoming so interesting to the people that people were following Jesus and the disciples around the countryside so that they could get a chance to hear what Jesus had to say and what he had to teach. Well, that's exactly what happened on this one day. Jesus and the disciples were spending some time together, and great crowds were following them, a crowd of almost 5,000 people. So Jesus was happy to spend time with all these people and talk to them and teach them and preach to them. Well, it started getting late in the day. All the people were getting hungry. Jesus and the disciples were getting hungry too. The disciples came to Jesus and they said, "Jesus, maybe we should send these people home so that they can get something to eat and we can go get something to eat too." Jesus said, "No, I think we should all stay here and you should find a way to feed them here." The disciples were looking at each other and nobody had any food with them. And even if they did, how would there be nearly enough food to feed the 5,000 people? Well, one of the disciples happened to notice a small boy in the crowd. And the boy had a lunch with him. Just a small lunch, something like what you might take to school in your lunch bag. And in the boy's lunch were 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. I made my own little lunch like the boys here. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. I don't want my fish to fall out of the basket. So Jesus said, "Bring the boy's lunch to me. Ask all the people to sit down." And the disciples did that. They brought the boy's lunch to Jesus. Jesus took the bread from the boy's lunch. He broke it and gave thanks for it. Jesus was really good about that, about thanking God for the meal that he and the disciples were about to have. And then he told the disciples to put the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes in some different baskets and start passing it around through the crowd. So that's what they did. And they passed the baskets amongst all the people. I'm sure you can imagine that it took quite a while to pass the food amongst 5,000 people. Well, when everybody seemed to have had something to eat and was settling down to hear Jesus again, the disciples went through the crowd and started gathering up the leftovers. And what do you know? With the leftovers they gathered, there were 12 baskets of food, bread and fish. So they were all able to eat too. And nobody went hungry. And there was some left over. There was enough for everyone. This is a really amazing story and makes you wonder how Jesus and the disciples were able to feed 5,000 people, starting with just 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, I think there's a lot of things we wonder about this story. Something I read this week about this story, though, said, "Bring God your gifts, and God will use them. And that was something I've never really heard about this story before, but I really liked that saying. This small boy had the gift of the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish, and he gave it gladly, and Jesus used it to feed 5,000 people. I wonder if we have some gifts that we could give and that God could use to help many others. That's something really interesting to wonder about. For some reason, this story reminds me of one of my favorite books. One of my favorite books is called Stone Soup. Maybe you've read it before. This book has been around for a long time. It's even older than I am. And I'm not going to read it to you, but I'll tell you what it's about. The book is about these 3 soldiers who are traveling home from the war. They're walking home. This story happened long before there were trains or cars or planes that could have taken the soldiers back to their home. So they were walking home, and as they were walking along, they got very hungry. Well, they came upon a village, and they were hoping that the people in the village might share some of their food with them, because the soldiers were very hungry. Well, the people in the village were not too excited about the idea of sharing their food with the soldiers. So when the soldiers came to the village, the villagers told them that they didn't have any food to share. So the soldiers got this idea that they would make stone soup for themselves and for all the people in the village, and that they could all share the stone soup. So they got a big pot, probably bigger than my whole stove, and they built a fire in the middle of the village square. They put the big pot over the fire, and they filled the pot with water, and then they decided to add 3 stones to the big pot full of water. So the villagers brought 3 stones, probably about this big. They put them in the big pot. They put the pot over the fire, and they started cooking the stone soup. Well, as the soup was cooking, everybody, the soldiers and the villagers, all got this bright idea that they could add some other things to the soup besides the stones, like carrots and cabbage and onions, maybe a little piece of meat, some barley, that's like a grain, and a little bit of milk. And what do you know? The people in the village found all those things in their cupboards and their pantries and put away in their basements. So little by little, they added some of these things to the stone soup, and it cooked and it cooked there in the town square, and before you know it, they all had a delicious soup that they could share. And then when the soup was ready, they found some other things, like some bread and some more meat and some things to drink. And they all had quite a feast together. So the thing I like about this story is that it's really a nice thing to do, to share your food with others. And when you do that, everybody gets even more than they started with, and they end up with a delicious feast. Something like a potluck dinner at a United Methodist Church. Well, anyway, I like to make soup too. Not stone soup, although I could try putting some stones in it. Probably my favorite kind of soup is Campbell's tomato soup. That's really easy. Just pour the can in the pot and add some water, some milk, and before you know it, you have soup. But another kind of soup that I like to make is called Hamburger soup. And the reason why I like to make it is it's really easy, it's quick, and it comes out nice and hot. And I really like to make hot soup in the winter. So I'm going to make some hamburger soup. You start with some beef broth, and you pour that into the pot. There it goes. Two cans of these stewed tomatoes. They go right into the pot. And I'm going to cut them a little. When they come out of the can, I think they're a little big. I cut them so that they're a little smaller pieces. 2 cans of that. I guess I should turn my burner on here. Oops, wrong one, wrong burner. There we go. Get that going. Then there's a can of mixed vegetables. That goes right in. And the hamburger part, I already cooked my hamburger. You have to cook it before you put it in. That goes right in. Then I'm going to stir it up. I'm going to let it cook for a while. Oh, I'll slice up the tomatoes. And then when after the soup starts boiling a little bit, I like to add this can of Great Northern beans. So let's let it cook for a while, and then I'll be back when it's almost done. Well, the soup is done. I wonder if you can see the steam from the soup in the video. Here it is. Got to be careful not to spill it all over. It's nice and hot, which is great on a cold winter day. And I made some little toasts to go with it, and they're nice and warm too. So now I'm going to eat the soup, and I'm going to share it. You can see another bowl over here right behind me, and that's the best part of making your favorite foods, is sharing them with others. So I hope you enjoyed the story today, and I hope you think of different ways that you can share your food or your toys or your books or other things with your friends and your family and the people that you like. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon.